I thought I'd get into this, and she's going to love this. Laura's going to love this. Because today, this is, without question, this is my favorite time of year. Even in these travel times where we're trying to get places, people just seem to be nicer. Now, it could be me, because I'm in a good mood. People around me seem to be in a good mood. But it's just, sometimes it's hard for people to be angry with you if you smile at them. So I say the title is Season of Giving. You know what? I didn't check. Now, where is it? Where's Mary? Did you put that in? She did. All right. And then I have the story of reconciliation, because that's really the season of giving. And so I wanted to kind of launch into this with this lesson today from 2 Corinthians chapter 9. But in this letter, 2 Corinthians, Paul is going to talk about this ministry of giving, but it's also going to reveal a principle that I'm going to use a very famous fable as an illustration. And so famous, we'll see. Probably every older person will recognize it. I'm not so sure about the younger folks. But from our text, let me go back and read it. It's 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 10 through 12. And it reads from the English Standard Version, "He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in every way to be generous in every way, which through us will produce thanksgiving to God. For the ministry of this service is not only supplying the needs of the saints, but is also overflowing in many thanksgivings to God." So, just so you know, because we like to get the principle idea out of the text. And this is a great principle. It's talking about this ministry of giving. But just so we honor the text and know what we're talking about here, Paul is sending this letter to the Corinthian congregations, and he's reminding them of an obligation they made. One of Paul's ministries is to, as he travels and he proclaims the gospel, he's also collecting funds for the Christians back in Jerusalem who are under a lot of stress, and they need resources. And so Paul's ministry is to gather up those resources, whether he brings it back, and I think at this time he's bringing it back, or he sends somebody back. But he's writing the letter to let the Corinthians know, remind them of the obligation, and be ready. So in other words, we're familiar with some of the passages. You might have a heading at the beginning of verse 6 here. It says, a cheerful giver. And this is a good principle, because we should give cheerfully and not under compulsion. We'll look at that. But the point of the text here that Paul's going to say, and this will be our basic 2-point lesson, God supplies. Sorry, it's 3 points, Linda. God supplies. He asks us to do the work. That's trust and obey him. But he supplies, he asks us to do the work. So he gives the sower the seed, more than he'll need. Plant abundantly so you can give abundantly is the principle there. But then, ultimately, it's to share in thanksgiving. So I'm going to use this ancient fable. And I know she may not listen to me right now and may not understand it, but this is a great fable. Now, I'm probably going to mess up the name. You guys might know the name, and you might have it, Sarah, in a different form, right? You'll recognize this, but it's a great story for kids. Androcles and the Lion. Do you remember it? See, I didn't think so. Miriam, does that sound? Androcles and the Lion. Okay. Well, when I tell you the story, you're definitely going to know the story. And I'm probably messing up the name. So Androcles and the Lion is a fable. And it was told about a runaway slave who finds himself in a cave as he's hiding out. And don't you know, in the cave, there's this angry lion. And so Androcles can't run out of the cave because he's being pursued, so he's stuck in the cave with this lion. But what he realizes is this lion is in distress. The lion has a thorn in his paw. So I know you know the story, right? So Androcles finds a way to help him, and it leads to a friendship but also a life-saving situation. So what happens is Androcles, spends time with the lion, they bond, and then Androcles goes on the run again. Well, of course, Androcles eventually gets captured, and he's going to be sentenced to death, and he's thrown into the arena of the lions. And of course, there's the lion. And the lion recognizes him, and the lion steps in and saves Androcles from the other lions. What happens is, because of that, Androcles is set free, and so is the lion. So it's a really neat story, right? But the fable emphasizes that acts of kindness and compassion can lead to unexpected blessings and the recognition of one's true friend. But this fable is often referenced, whether it's in literature, art, but it symbolizes the importance of compassion and the potential for redemption in all beings. So that's kind of the fable, and I wanted us to keep in mind, I grew up, forgive me for this reference, but I grew up with fractured fairy tales. All right, so oftentimes they would put a humorous twist on some of the old fables, but at least we were exposed to them. I would say this is one of these profound. This one is profound. It's the story of a runaway slave and an angry lion. That story is life. Our life is a series of events that can resonate with the runaway slave and the angry lion in so many profound ways. But Paul reveals this principle in this ministry that he identifies. I'm not going to go through all of it, but if you go back to 2 Corinthians chapter 8, and you just look at the first two verses of 2 Corinthians chapter 8, he says, "We want you to know, brothers, about the grace of God that has been given among the churches of Macedonia. For in a severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part." Doesn't that seem odd? An odd thing to say? I think Paul is saying he's kind of overwhelmed that even in their poverty, how generous they are to this ministry, that he's going to bring these funds back to Jerusalem, to the Jewish Christians who are being persecuted there. So, picking it up in chapter 9, verse 6, and you may have the heading, "The Cheerful Giver," Paul says the point is this: whoever sows sparingly will reap also sparingly, and whoever sows abundantly will also reap bountifully. For each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that having all sufficiency in all things at all times, that you may abound in every good work. As it is written, he has distributed freely, he has given to the poor, his righteousness endures forever. And that leads us back to our text. So I said, so the first part, or the first point that God supplies. Verse 10. He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness. So we don't always understand this. And we were looking at in our class this morning, it's just God always presents these contrasts. And oftentimes, like we were looking at the minor prophet Habakkuk this morning, and it's the kind of the lament of anybody looking out in their world and saying, how can a good God allow these bad things to happen? But I want us to see what Paul is going to do here. The Christians in Jerusalem are under duress. They're being stressed. And people have decided they're going to give to this cause, and so he can deliver these funds and help them. And so the principle has always been there throughout Scripture, namely in Malachi, when God says, just test me. You see if you can outgive me. In other words, God says, if you give, see that I don't give back to you plentifully. But he's saying, listen, all this is from God. There's a purpose in this, and we don't always understand it if we don't have the right attitude. I guess that's going to be my point, and why I named the lesson the season of giving. Verse 11 is going to be, God asks us to trust and obey him. But he's given us this work to do. He says, verse 11, you will be enriched in every way to be generous in every way, which through us will produce thanksgiving to God. So God has given you the ability and given you the means to share. And he says, like we were looking in class this morning, God's answer to the prophet was, trust me, you just wait and see. Because our question is always, why is this happening? Or more personally, why is this things happening to me? And we're not seeing the bigger picture. So verse 12 is the thanksgiving. And for this ministry, the ministry of this service is not only supplying the needs of the saints, but is also overflowing in many thanksgiving to God. Why is that so important? Well, as you're going to see, is because, watch this, 13 through 15. By their approval of this service, they will glorify God because of your submission flowing from your confession of the gospel of Christ and the generosity of your contribution for them and for all others, while they long for you and pray for you because of the surpassing grace of God upon you. And then Paul says, thanks be to God for his inexpressible gift. Now, why do you think Paul is describing this as this inexpressible gift? We've been going through this in various elements in our different study classes. But one of the things I marvel at, especially as we study through the New Testament, is what everybody, even the angels, are longing to see. How is God going to work this plan of his out? How is he going to reconcile everything? How could you possibly reconcile the Jew and Gentile? And Paul's saying because of this ministry that the Gentiles are giving to supply the needs of the saints, the Christians in Jerusalem are praising God for the Gentiles. There can be reconciliation here. And so Paul had done this. We just finished our study in Romans, but Paul had gone through this in Romans, and many times as Paul's explaining how this Jew and Gentile, because I believe the whole Roman letter was written as an apostolic authority to say, you guys cannot split and become a Jewish Christian and Gentile Christian congregation. That can't happen. You need to understand Jesus died to reconcile both in the body of his flesh, and we are one body. You cannot divide. And so here it is again in his letter to the Corinthians, showing how is God going to reconcile us and really get us over this. Well, this is one of the ways. Now, Paul uses this in his Roman letter to say, listen, he's going to have an abundant crop of Gentiles as a means to make the Jews who haven't submitted to Christ jealous and say, hey, kind of like, hey, the train is leaving. Don't you want to get on? So enter into this reconciliation. So the moral here is, because we always have those, again, the fractured fairy, even in our fractured fairy tales, there's always a moral. Most of our TV shows that we grew up with, because our stories that we tell the kids, whether the story has the moral or not, we're going to put it in there. As a parent, we're going to kind of say, do you understand this? And so the moral is kindness plants seeds for blessings, often appearing when the circumstances call for them most profoundly. So the purpose of God is to reconcile us together in one body for glory. That really is Ephesians chapter 2, but if you wanted to key in just on one verse, Ephesians 2:16. He's reconciled us together in one body. And so our God is a God of reconciliation. Every act in harmony with the will of God to reconcile the world is transformative. I want us to keep this in mind as we're in this season. This is the season of giving. If you can't practice this now, I mean, when people are receptive, this is such a great opportunity. But these are transformative moments. I'm going to give you some action points on that. But the story keeps repeating in our lives. Runaway slave and angry lion. We have these confrontations or these meetings, and often we don't react well when we're confronted with an angry lion. We just want to escape. And sometimes, if we have the right attitude towards God, we might break down a barrier. When we meet a lion in distress, and our circumstance for the moment fades, if we can act with compassion, it can open up a whole new world. I've been saying this is so true. If your heart is open for this, if you could see the heart of God that wants everyone to be reconciled, people are hurting. They need to know somebody's listening. We live in a culture today that everybody wants to be heard, but nobody's listening. Everybody's on their phone and they want to be heard. They want their, the preacher here used to say, everybody needs to be validated. That's true, but we're in an ocean of just sound bites and we just want to be heard. But God calls us to listen. We read this morning. Wait on the Lord. Unbelievable what can happen. When we acknowledge our station as a runaway slave, then we can meet the lion of our redemption. It's profound. This imagery, this fable, it's here's the blessing. So that's the purpose of God. The purpose of God is reconciliation. The blessings are just to name a few. And thank you, Alan, for reading that wonderful prayer last week. But it was great. We count our blessings. We have so much to be thankful. But here's a few. Peace, joy, and glory. Be at peace, not angry. Let me tell you the secret to this, because Paul found the secret to being content in all things. Choose not to be angry. Life is a choice. We're either going to react poorly or we might act graciously, but if we don't make up our mind, if we don't have the right attitude, we tend to react. And what we're called to be is salt and light. That means assess a situation and be a blessing. So be at peace. In John 16:33, Jesus said, I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And it's also an example of how making peace leads to joy. There are so many blessings that we didn't know. And we've all had these experiences where we held our tongue and we said something nice, and then, oh my goodness, I had no idea how they were hurting. And I was telling folks here, I've had so many of these encounters over the last week of strangers coming in, and I would just ask them how their Thanksgiving is going or what are they up to. And oh my goodness, I've had this experience where they just wanted somebody to listen. What a difference. We're being refined or fashioned for glory. We're given everything we need to represent God well. So here's the action point. Be intentional and find your tag. So find something that comes natural to you. One of them is, just God bless. Sometimes you just, when you end the conversation, just God bless. But find something that fits your personality that you could just say to somebody that, will be a blessing. Practice it now in this season, because it's a little easier. People are much more receptive. When you hear one, you say, I like that one. I'll use that one. Look and ask for the opportunity to pray. You'd be surprised how many folks appreciate prayers. Like I said, and you guys know, my family is always, I use the term high drama, high drama at the holidays. But it is amazing now how individual conversations I have with family members now that need prayer and express that. Sometimes they catch me off guard because I wouldn't have expected that from you. Remember this. Listening is a skill to be developed. When you ask somebody if there's something you can pray about, listen and then repeat it back to make sure you got it right. It's an opportunity to practice this skill. Because sometimes we hear things and then we process it through what's going through our mind. Be attentive and listen to what they're saying and then say it back to make sure you got it right. And that's a great way to hone this skill. But for our action, consecrate your life with prayer. I have the privilege of being around very intentional evangelists. You guys know Jerry Tallman. We got to be good friends. I worked a lot with Jerry Tallman when I was in Texas, and Jerry starts every day. He prays over this, and he prays for these opportunities, and he prays for the right words to say when the opportunities present themselves. And it's no surprise that they present themselves all the time. We just get caught in our busy life and just react to things as they happen. This is just the life of being intentional. This season of giving, remember, God supplies. Trust and obey, and share in thanksgiving. God is listening. Begin with him.